Hi, I'm George Davies. I'm here today to try and help you guys lay that perfect lawn. There's so many ways to try and lay a lawn, there's so many different ways, old techniques, new techniques, but ultimately I want to try and give you a really basic, concise how-to guide to make sure that you can lay that perfect lawn for your back garden. And my cat Bertie today is here to give us a hand. You will need a turfing iron, a spade, a shovel, a fork, a rake, a plank, turf and topsoil. So first steps, removing the old turf. There's two ways of doing this. One's the old traditional way and one's the new modern way with the new mechanised turf lifter. I'm going to show you the old way, which effectively is taking the old trusty spade, coming around on the area. Once you've marked out the area that you want to basically remove, you come along with a spade around the outside, cut down nicely to produce the edge you want. Now imagine the whole area with still grass, just like this. So I left this to try and sort of explain how we do it. So what we'll do on this is just like in a way when you're scoring flapjack, when you're trying to sort of cut those little lines in the flapjack, so that when it completely dries out or cools down, it'll produce those nice little pieces ready for you to eat. By doing this way, it means you want to come along with this lovely old turf lifter, and we just try and take off the top sort of 20-30 mil of turf. And because I've scored it in a nice way, like that sort of flapjack, that effectively means that you're just removing pieces of turf like that in one fell swoop. And just take away any remaining old grass from the area. The reason we're doing this is we don't want to leave anything behind, because effectively any organic matter like that will effectively rot down over time, and you have lots of it around, it'll potentially sort of settle underneath and undulate. So trying to remove all organic matter before we start digging and preparing properly. So this turf was cut yesterday, it arrived this morning, and even though it's not overly warm today, it's amazing how much the turf has already dried out. Okay, so that's obviously nice moist soil on the back, and obviously the top is fairly dry. As we get into summer, please try and keep the turf covered up out of the way of the sun, because it will basically fry the little roots at the back. And if you can't lay it straight away, please break the turf down individually and restack it, because this pallet of turf is effectively a big pallet of wet grass clippings with soil around the back of it. And the heat in the middle of these pallets gets so hot, it will damage the turf so quickly. I don't want you to go and do all this preparation, all this work, turf arrive, you get held up, and then suddenly you go and lay it and it's started to go yellow and black and smelly and all sorts. So it's a fresh living product. Please make sure that if you can't lay it straight away, you break it down to protect the turf so you get the lawn you want. The first thing I do is I take a spade, I go along and I dig a hole. And the reason why I dig a hole, and I dig a hole basically quite deep, is because the roots go down 1/2 metre, if not more. And so what we're doing is we're going through and we're making sure that there's nothing in the way to stop those roots going down. The amount of times I go in there and you start digging and you got rocks and bricks and hardcore and concrete or old paths, old brick paths and bits and pieces. So it's really important that effectively, first of all, you go down and you make sure that there's nothing that's going to stop those roots going down. Next thing to do is to go along and fork the area properly. The reason we're doing that is because 9 times out of 10, if you've had a lawn down for a long time, it's got really compacted, and roots need air just as much as a leaf does. So it's really important you go through and you dig over the whole area to about 6 inches. There's absolutely no point in basically just sort of going along and just doing this, because effectively the roots go down a lot further. So give the chance, give the roots, give the turf every opportunity it can to get down and get established. Okay, so now for the fun bit. So now what we're going to do is going to blind a bit of decent topsoil, which we sell, loads and loads of it. And I'm just going to literally drop some topsoil around the outside. And then once we get the whole lot blinded off and happy, then we'll start laying some turf. This topsoil we sell is absolutely fantastic for laying underneath turf. It's really workable. There's a real nice body to it. When it goes wet, it doesn't go too sticky and too clayey. It's just gorgeous stuff. I've got a sort of rough level just now. I'm going to go through in a minute and start to basically just sort of squash the soil down, firm it down literally across the area, which again effectively you want to just make sure it's nice and firm all the way across. You're just basically just treading the area down with our feet, and then we'll rake again in a minute and probably do this 3 or 4 times really. I can then just make sure any hollows I can really get sorted out now. So yeah, so I'm happy with that. That's obviously the last bit of raking done. I'm fairly happy. Obviously, that's as level as I can get it for today. So yeah, let's get some turf down, guys. We try and make sure the turfs are lovely and light and lovely and strong at all times. These ones are, which is great. Occasionally, if the rolls aren't quite, then you might have to sort of cradle them and hold them a bit more like this. If you want to do a bend up, but that's nothing there for now. So let's come across here. I'll leave that in there a minute, and then we'll start this side. So again, it's just like a roll on a carpet. We'll bring that in, have that on the edge. That'll pack down quite nicely, and then literally we'll be coming along and unrolling the turf as we go. What I'm probably inclined to do as well is just roll and bend over that piece of the turf that has been in the middle of the roll. What I'm going to do is effectively I'm going to take the rolls of turf and lay the long straight edge first. I'll come round on the curve and then come up this short area here. I'll then cut the turf off and start rolling it that way and stagger the joints. The reason why I do a perimeter first means that otherwise, you've got to cut into that edge all the time and it looks a bit of a mess. So put one row around the whole of the area first, cut into it and look absolutely fantastic. So it's really quite hard to get turf to bend sideways. So all we have to do is basically, rather than having this turf here and then cutting the edge down here, is we just basically cut the turf to here. We then pick this piece of turf up and move that into position so it's nicely along the line we want to go. We then get a knife and cut down that piece of turf. That then comes out, and that's wastage. And that then comes in. We take a knife and chop off that piece in there. That goes into there. Push together. And on the edge, we just come in and we have that back in line with the edge of the grass. That becomes wastage, and then at the end we'll come along and we'll squash all these edges down nice and tidily so they knit in. When we come to the curves like this, to be honest, the turf will bend a little bit. If it is a bit more of a tighter curve than this, we'll just put a couple of slits on the inside of the turf to allow it to bend around the corner. Hey, Bertie, you're coming to inspect, are you? And even in that point there, you could just do with a little bit more of an angle there. So I'll just have a little bit off there, into the middle, So make sure that edge butts up nice and neatly first. And we'll have the turf to come round the corner like this. And again, what we'll do is we'll just make sure that that butts up nicely into there to start with. And again, the same thing, we'll just overlay that, have that flat, draw a little score line down there where we want to cut the turf, bring that in there, have that off, and that will water in and squash down the boards later on. Reference to boards, just use some old boards you've got in the garage or something you've got lying around. Nothing special, but again, try and work off the boards. It just basically just firms the sort of the turf and makes contact with the soil. So it's just a good way of doing it rather than putting some hoof marks in. When it's dry, it's okay. When it's certain a bit damp, wet conditions, if you put a hoof mark into the turf, it's really, really hard to try and get out again. So just try and stay off the turf now until it's all established. All I'm going to do is just describe to you exactly how we're cutting in properly. Obviously it's not 90 degrees, 90 degrees would be across here somewhere. So I want to show you how we sort of cut in to an edge that's not quite square. All right, so all we do is we overlay the turf, we bring the turf down until effectively it needs to be in that position there on that corner. And then all we do is just take that corner there, which we know where we've got to be. We've got to come straight in here to a point on that corner there, which means that all we've got to do is put that together nice and tidily, and we've got a nice neat edge to work to. Okay, just want to explain where we come to the end, how we cut in properly again, and also why we are sort of staggering the joints like basically you would if you're doing any brickwork, so the joints aren't all basically in line with one another. So because when the turf is harvested, it's all basically harvested the same way, is that when we cut it off, so this roll has been basically harvested and the roller has rolled this way to squash all the grass flat, so that when we chop it off and we turn this piece around that way, it will basically look a different shade of green, as you can see here. So you've got this grass has been flattened this way and this grass is flattened that way. So that's how you can get your lovely stripe straight away. If you've got a really big lawn, and I've only seen done once, if you double stripe it, which basically means that effectively you lay 2 rolls in one direction and 2 rolls in the opposite direction, it looks like you've got a really big lawnmower and makes a really smart job. So we'll just chop this piece off the end here, and then that piece will then just flick around and come into there. And if you've got a slight angle, look, it fits in there like a glove. Look at that joint. Look, some joints go together really, really well. Some joints just need a little bit of a TLC. Now look, in terms of staggering joint, I can get away with that just about. I've got about 3 inches basically gap between that joint and that. So I'm happy with that. But say if the joint is the same as that joint, then just chop some off and make a bit shorter to make sure the joints are staggered. So when we come to the end and you think, oh no, just a little bit too short, a little bit annoying. So what we can do is we'll just have a little smidgen off that piece there to get that piece to cut in quite nicely. And then we lay an offcut we've already got already, and we know we want to get to that piece there. So we try, and again, aim for that finger, which I imagine it's about there somewhere. A little bit of guesswork involved, but as long as that's watered in correctly, that will bed in, no problem at all. The only thing I would say is if you're quite pernickety like me, when you use the offcut, make sure you use the offcut with a grain going that way as opposed to the opposite way. So for the stripe, it still looks that way as opposed to look a mess. Okay, right, oh hey up Bertie, it's coming to inspect the last little piece. So what we're going to do, I'm going to give you 2 options. if we wanted to do a square and effectively just leave that like this, I'll show that first. But what we'll do, if you want to do a circle, I'll just cut this piece of turf down there like that, and I'll cut this piece of turf down there like that. And then what we'll do, if we roll that up and have that there, and then pull that turf from this side. There's me treading on the turf, which I said you shouldn't do. Pull it up nice and tight. That comes into there. If we come around the far side and chop this piece of turf off there and discard that, we could actually use some of that piece across there if you wanted to, but I'm going to basically make this into a little circle. So what we'll do, we'll take this and we'll come round like this, go onto there, let's see what we got. So that comes out, that comes out, that comes out, and that one's finishing off to that piece there, and then there you go. We'll get some bark on that, and it looks nice and tidy. Look, we went through this area this morning, 38 square metres. We said, or I said, add 5%, which takes it to 40 square metres. Now, to be honest, with the area we've got, there's quite a lot of offcuts. I've tried to be fairly sort of use the offcuts best I can, but even with basically being fairly sort of aware and not trying to sort of waste sort of 2 whole rolls of turf, I've actually used 42 rolls of turf. So look, there's basically 2 square metres in there of offcuts. So if you are doing an area where you've got lots of cutting in, probably add 10% just to make sure that literally you've got enough turf to cover the area and not be short. Okay, so that's our lawn done. What I've been inclined to do, please don't walk on it for a week or two at least. We'll get some water on it in the next video and explain what to do next. But yeah, the lawn looks fantastic. If you have any other questions that we haven't answered in the video, please get in contact either by email or give us a ring, and we'll happily answer those questions and make sure you have the lawn that you want.